Where's my tea, Doctor? Here it is. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, everybody. We are live on Zoom, and this is the second lesson in our course, with the title of our course being The Kabbalah of Meaning. And this is lesson 2, and I open up the textbook. Please open up your textbooks to page 35 for the lesson introduction, which says, to make or not to make meaning. When life lacks luster, should we invent a more meaningful way of seeing things, or is there already a purpose hiding in plain sight? And to start the class, ladies and gentlemen, please open up your books to page 36, where you see an image in the books. For those of you that don't have a book, I'm going to put it on the PowerPoint, so hold on a second while I start the PowerPoint from the beginning, play from start, and then do it as a slideshow, and then share the screen. And to make or not make meaning. And look at these images on the screen. And ladies and gentlemen, the question for you is, can you figure out what these items are? What are these things that we have on our screen or in, what are these things? What do you see at home? Do you see my screen or do you see me, or both?
Both.
We see we see your screen, and then you're the.
Okay, good. And you see these little items, these two items.
Yes.
So the question for the day is, can you figure out what the function, what is the purpose of these items that you see in front of you? Can you figure out their function?
If something is man-made and doesn't have function, it's called art.
If it's man-made and it doesn't have a function, it's called art, says Elena. Very good. Can you figure out the function of these items? Do these items have a function, and what is the function of these items?
The one on the right looks to me that if it moves, that it could chop things in that little there. That's what it looks like.
Okay, so the one on the right looks like a chopper to Phyllis. Does anyone else have any other ideas of what it might be?
The one on the left looks like a hook.
The one on the left looks like a hook. Part of it is a hook. What's the rest of it?
Twist it sideways.
Oh, that's interesting, Dovbe. You could attach it to a wall and it would be a hook.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Turn it on its side and it could be a hook. Okay, interesting. Very, very interesting question. Okay, very interesting ideas on what to do with these things. We are going to come back to this later in our class. But first, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. First, I think somebody might have put something on the chat. Let me see. Somebody said it looks like a pipe holder or cigar rest. That's on the left. Right looks like a nutcracker or olive pitter. Very good. Very interesting. We will come back to these answers and these ideas a little later in today's class. So if you look on page 37 in our books, it says Ecclesiastes Revisited. In lesson 1, we started the previous lesson with reading the first verses of the book of Ecclesiastes, in which King Solomon laments the futility of all existence. All is futile, he proclaims. Life is, after all, fleeting and meaningless. King Solomon did not just make the statement off the cuff. He said it after experimenting with every type of pleasure in an attempt to find joy. After everything he tried, something was still missing. I'm going to continue now reading on page 38, King Solomon's description of his experiment with life, his effort to try every pleasure in the world. Probably we hope in a kosher way, right? But let's see what he said. He said, I amassed great wealth. I built homes, planted vineyards. I designed gardens and orchards filled with every kind of fruit tree. I made reservoirs to water entire groves of trees. I acquired male and female servants and had more cattle, herds, and flocks than anyone before me in Jerusalem. I piled up silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I brought in male and female singers and every luxury people could desire, chests and chests of it. I became wealthier than anyone who came before me in Jerusalem, and I still had my wisdom. I didn't hold back from anything my eyes wanted. I didn't deny myself any pleasure. I took joy in everything I achieved. But in the end, that joy was all I really got from it. Then I looked back at all I had worked for, everything I had built and gained, and it was all pointless. Just chasing the wind. Nothing truly lasting under the sun. I had it all, but I wasn't satisfied. It wasn't meaningful. It reminds me of what my Zayda, my grandfather, used to tell us when we were kids. He would tell us, money isn't everything. Health and happiness is at least 2%. King Solomon had it all, but he wasn't satisfied. What was he missing? So the whole book of Ecclesiastes is about this search, about his experience of having everything and being the wealthiest and the wisest and getting no real satisfaction from it until finally he comes to realize what's truly valuable and worthwhile. And we're going to get there through today's class. Any questions or comments? So, have you heard of the hedonic treadmill? Have you heard this expression? The idea of a hedonic treadmill is that happiness boosted by material success is not permanent. We quickly adapt and return to baseline. You know, the thing about a treadmill is the more you run on it, but you don't get anywhere. So the thing with hedonism, right, is pleasure. When you're living a lifestyle where you're searching for pleasures. So research has shown, I once read a book about this, they did research across many different cultures and civilizations and all types, at all levels of the economic spectrum, and asked people, what do you need? How much money do you need in order for you to feel that you would have what you need, to feel satisfied and to feel wealthy? And consistently, people said the answer was double their income. Whatever level people were at, they wanted double their income in order to feel wealthy. If only I had double the income, then I would really be able to live. Now, the truth is, the fascinating thing is if they get it, you know what they want then? Double their income. So it's a fascinating thing about humans is that we want more than we have, and we're never satisfied with what we have. Obviously, we remember the fascinating Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in Ethics of Our Fathers that says, who is wealthy? Someone who's satisfied with what they have. That's the opposite, right? A wealthy person is satisfied with what they have. They have everything they need. It's actually interesting. We're coming to, in the Torah portion, we're going to be reading about, not this week, but next, or in 2 weeks' time, we read the story about when Jacob and Esau meet again after being parted for many years. And Jacob says, Esau says, I have a lot. I've acquired a lot. And Jacob says, I've acquired everything. Esau had a lot and it was never enough. Jacob, whatever he had was enough. It was always there. He had everything he needed, no matter how much he had. So it's an attitude, it's a lifestyle, right? So the idea of a hedonic treadmill, though, and it's a fascinating thing that if you increase luxuries for people, or increase wealth, or increase something good, it will make them happier, short term. But then they revert to the mean. Huh?
Well, it's a no, I don't know exactly that experiment, but it's like, okay, only if I get that, it was all I need, and then a year later, well, you have it, but no, that's not what I really wanted.
That's
And
true.
it's not necessarily when linear and just money. Maybe you have all the money now, you want power or
There's always something else.
Something.
There's always something else. So the fascinating thing is that people revert to their happiness level. You might have a spike in happiness for some circumstantial things, but generally speaking, people revert to their personal mean once they get used to whatever they're living with. And by the way, it happens the other way around as well, but that we'll talk about that another time. But the fascinating thing is that so this is a fascinating concept, and we see this in our society because historically, humans have never lived as well as we do today. Right? We've never lived with as much luxury and with much ease and with as much technology and with as much things at our disposal. And whether technology is a good thing or a bad thing, we'll leave for another day. But we've never had as much and lived as comfortably. And yet, people are not getting happier. People are not happier. And so the question is, how do we put it all together? So King Solomon is sort of addressing it. I have everything, but it didn't satisfy me. I didn't feel that this was the answer to anything. Let's read a bit more. Page 40. He keeps on going. I turn my thoughts to understanding wisdom. So if physical pleasures wouldn't answer my question, let me pursue wisdom. He was the wisest of all men. Wisdom, and also madness and foolishness. I saw that wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. A wise person sees where they are going, but a fool stumbles in the dark. But I also realized that the same fate awaits them both. So I thought, if I'll end up just like the fool, what's the point of being wise? And I saw that this too is meaningless. Because neither the wise nor the foolish are remembered for long. In time, both are forgotten. And in the end, the wise person dies just like the fool. That made me hate life. Everything happening under the sun seemed so pointless, just chasing the wind. Any questions or comments? He had a family.
Well,
It didn't answer his need for meaning. It didn't answer everything.
built-
Family wasn't enough.
he
Pardon?
built a temple. He built a temple. What
He
else?
built the temple in Jerusalem, and still
Right.
he didn't feel that it gave him all the answer. He couldn't find where is the true meaning in life.
Depression, that's all.
Depression.
Couple Xanaxes and he'll be good.
Pardon?
Couple Xanaxes and then he would be good.
Page 42, ladies and gentlemen. Nachmanides, the famous commentator on Torah. Nachmanides, Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, comments on this. And he said he wrote a sermon on Ecclesiastes. And he says like this: futility of futilities, said Kohelet, futility of futilities, all is futile. If another person had said this, we would have said, they never amassed even 2 coins in their life, Yet they speak about the wealth of the world and declare it futility. But Solomon, about whom it is written, the king made silver in Jerusalem as abundant as stones, is indeed suited to render all as futility of futilities. Behold, Solomon, the ruler, the powerful one, the wise, authored this entire book to render the whole world as meaningless and to tell us that everything is utterly futile. So what's the point here? So the point, ladies and gentlemen, is that what King Solomon is telling us is that it's possible to have everything you want and still have a meaningless life. And ultimately, he will answer the question about where meaning comes from. And that's the journey we're going to read through tonight and try to come to King Solomon's final answer. By the way, technical point, announcement, if anybody at home needs a book, please be in touch with me about getting one delivered to you or sent to you, depending on where you are. We have books for you, so we just have to figure out, or you can come pick one up over here if you want, but we have books. Okay, so let's learn a little bit more about King Solomon. So on the screen, you'll see that King Solomon reigned from the year 837 to 797 BCE. It's a long time ago. He brought unprecedented peace to the land of Israel. He fortified the infrastructure, trade, and military of the land of Israel. In fact, he ruled over probably not just Israel, but surrounding countries as well. And people would come from far to pay tribute to him because he was the most powerful king of his time. He was also the wisest of all men. He wrote the book of Proverbs, composed thousands of proverbs and songs. And also he constructed the first holy temple in Jerusalem. So he lived an incredibly fulfilling life, one would think. And yet he writes Ecclesiastes, in which he describes his angst about the meaning of it all. What's the eternal value in all the things he was doing, he was asking? Where do you find eternity, right? Futile vanities, things that come and go. But is there any eternal value to anything we do? That was the question he was grappling with. What was he missing? So in last week's class, we learned that meaning comes like being like a tree. Just like a tree, we have to grow and be productive and give and have relationships. But is there something more than all of this? That's the question we're expressing tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn to page 43 in our books. And here we leave the world of Torah, and we're going to go to Tolstoy for a little literary analysis of a similar topic. A fascinating essay by Tolstoy in which he said, it's called A Confession. 5 years ago, something very strange began to happen to me. At first, I experienced moments of perplexity and arrest of life, as though I did not know what to do or how to live, and I felt lost and became dejected. But this passed, and I went on living as before. Then these moments of perplexity began to recur oftener and oftener. I think somebody in the translation department forgot their English, and always in the same form. They were always expressed by the questions, what is it for? What does it lead to? I understood that it was no casual indisposition, but something very important. And if these questions constantly repeated themselves, they would have to be answered. And I tried to answer them. The questions seemed such stupid, simple, childish questions. But as soon as I touched them and tried to solve them, I at once became convinced, 1, that they are not childish and stupid, but the most important and profound of life's questions, and 2, that try as I would, I could not solve them. Before occupying myself with my Samara estate, the education of my son, or the writing of a book, I had to know why I was doing it. As long as I did not know why, I could do nothing. and I could not live. Amid the thoughts of estate management, which greatly occupied me at that time, the question would suddenly occur to me. Well, you have 6,000 desiatinas of land in Samara government with 300 horses, and what next? And I was quite disconcerted and did not know what to think. Or when considering my plans for the education of my children, I would say to myself, what for? Or when thinking of the fame my works would bring me, I said to myself, very well, you'll be more famous than Gogol or Pushkin or Shakespeare or Molière or than all the writers in the world. And what of it? And I could find no reply at all. Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Or comments? Pardon? Bummer for him, right? That he was getting no satisfaction for anything because he needed to know what's the bigger meaning of what I'm doing.
Just sometimes it's just material things, and that's not, well, it's nice and you need them. That doesn't give you the inner, at least it doesn't give me the inner satisfaction or that feeling of, I don't know, accomplishment or joy, I guess. Or
In other words,
purpose.
what Tolstoy is saying is if we don't know why we're doing it,
Yeah.
if there's no higher purpose for it, then there's no satisfaction in it. As long as you're asking the question why. So some people just don't ask why. But that doesn't last for very long. That doesn't last for very long. Because we're hardwired to want to have meaning. We want to know why. We want to have purpose. We want to have meaning. And so to address this, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look back to the Torah, to scripture, to the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, we're going to get the answer to tonight's question. Queen Esther is going to reveal the answer. Many of the mysteries of life can be found in the Purim story, and especially the story of Esther.
Leave it to the women.
Of course. So we all know the story. King Achashverosh needed a new wife, and he searched the land, and he found the most beautiful woman of all, and she was Esther. And her cousin Mordechai, who told her, Esther, don't reveal that you're a Jew. And she went into the palace, and she became the queen. And then the king elevated Haman, and made him the grand vizier, and the prime minister, chief advisor. And Haman, the wicked anti-Semite, said, well, let's use our power. Let me use my power to annihilate the Jews. And he convinced Achashverosh to give him permission to kill all the Jews, men, women, and children in one day. And word went out to Shushan and all 127 countries, the whole known world that was controlled by Achashverosh, that all the Jews were to be killed on one day. And Mordechai, the leader of the Jews, heard about the decree and sent a message to his cousin, Queen Esther, in the palace, asking her to intercede. And let's see what happens. In our books on page 46, Mordechai gave Hathach a copy of the written decree that had been circulated in Shushan. Instructing him to show it to Esther and to urge her to go before the king, to plead with him and beg for the lives of her people. Hathach, is it Hathach or Hathach? Hathach went and delivered Mordechai's message to Esther. Esther then said to Hathach, I think we say Hasach. Esther then said to Hathach and instructed him to relay her words to Mordechai. So this is Esther's response, right? Mordechai says, please help, plead for the Jews. What does Esther reply? All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that anyone, man or woman, who enters the king's inner court without being summoned is subject to death unless the king extends his golden scepter, granting permission to live. And I have not been summoned to the king in 30 days. I can't just walk up to the king. I could be killed for that. That's very risky. And I don't seem to be in favor at the moment. It's been 30 days since he called for me. Esther's message was conveyed to Mordechai. Mordechai sent back his reply to Esther. Don't imagine that you, of all the Jews, will escape just because you're in the palace. If you remain silent at this moment, relief and deliverance will come for the Jews from another source, but you and your father's house will perish. Mordechai was a strong believer in the eternity of the Jewish people and that Hashem would save the Jews. He thought Esther might be the vehicle, but if she would choose to walk away from her mission, somebody else would do it. Instead of an Esther,
You will never know.
there might be a Lester. Actually, there's a very cute kids movie that was made called Megillat Lester, about some kid named Lester who goes back in time to Shushan and lands up messing everything up and lands up causing the situation called Megillas Lester instead of Megillas Esther. That's where I got the joke from.
Children's called Veggie Tales.
I haven't seen that one.
The Sunday morning values with Saturday morning fun. Yeah, I think that's it. And it's fabulous. They have a whole series of different, it's all animated. And they do a whole thing on Queen Esther.
Okay, Veggie Tales.
Veggie Tales,
I have to look for that.
yeah.
Okay, so that if not Esther, it would be Lester. Okay, but it wouldn't be. And he says, so what most commentaries understand this to mean is Mordechai is saying to Esther, you're going to perish. You might live a long life, but you certainly won't be remembered as Queen Esther who saved the Jews. This is your moment. This is your destiny. In fact, he says it explicitly, page 47. And who knows, perhaps you became queen for such a time as this. This might be the whole reason that you became the queen. In fact, it probably is. Not only that, this is probably the reason your soul came down to this world in the first place, to be the one to go to the king and save the Jews. So are you going to step up to the plate and fulfill your destiny, or walk away and leave it to somebody else? That's the question. So what does Esther respond? Suddenly all fear is gone. Page 47 at the bottom of the page. Esther said to reply to Mordechai, go, gather all the Jews who are found in Shushan and fast for me. And fast means not only to fast, but to pray. Do not eat and do not drink for 3 days, night and day. I too, along with my maidens, will fast likewise. And then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I'll perish. But I'm going to go do what I need to do. So what happens over here, ladies and gentlemen? What happens over here is that suddenly, by the way, the commentators look at this passage and see a fascinating thing happens to Esther here. Until now, throughout the story, Esther is passive. She's taken to the palace. She's raised by her uncle. She's told by her cousin, Mordechai. She's raised by her cousin Mordechai. She is told by Mordechai, don't reveal who you are. She takes no initiative. She's a passive character. Suddenly she has a mission. Oh, she starts giving instructions. Fast for me. We're going to pray. We're going to do this. She starts writing books. Everything happens. She becomes, now it's suddenly she rises up and she becomes the main character in the whole story. You see it when you read the book of Esther, how she goes from being this passive character to this very active character. What happens? She discovers her purpose. She discovers her mission.
Rabbi,
Yes.
she discovers it, but she also she turns to God to help.
Of course she turns to God. She understands she can't do anything on her own and she needs God's help. Absolutely. And this isn't a story of diplomacy. In fact, if it was only diplomacy, she probably would have spent the 3 days in the beauty parlor instead of fasting and praying.
Right, exactly.
But she realizes that it's only with God's help that she'll be successful. But at the same time, recognizing that she's God's messenger here, she becomes alive and she becomes this very active person. And the fascinating thing is, once she has a mission, she blossoms. And the lesson from it is that Esther discovers her purpose in life. Living a meaningful life is not only about making meaning out of the things that you have in life, trying to find meaning. Could you imagine what it must have been like for Esther to live in that palace where she didn't really want to be for all those years and trying to make meaning out of it? It's probably pretty miserable. But then one day there's a value to what she's doing. She's there for a reason. When she discovers the reason for why she's there, she comes alive. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the lesson we're going to take from that in our course, Kabbalah of Meaning, is that if you really want to have meaning, the question isn't, how do I make meaning out of my life? The question is, what is the purpose for why I am here? We have to find purpose, our own individual purpose in this world. And when we find that, then everything becomes meaningful. And the difference is, if you look at the page 48 in our book, we have a little table, which basically says that we can be subjective about trying to find what my meaning is, or how do I find meaningful things to do in my life? But those things will never satisfy us. We can look, I'm looking at the screen, you can look for meaning in knowledge or in activism or in friendships or in the arts. I think that's what those icons are trying to tell us. I'm not quite sure. But it's really subjective. They can mean whatever you want them to mean. Because meaning is very subjective. If meaning is subjective and meaning begins with me and ends with me, then I may never really have much meaning because it changes and it's fleeting and it's not really objectively true. But if I can find objectively what my purpose is in life, then I have a real mission. And when I have a mission, then everything becomes meaningful. And that's something we can learn from Esther. Page 49 in our textbooks, we have a text here, a quote from an essay written by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. Think about it. Every function that was once performed by religion can now be done by something else. In other words, if you want to explain the world, you don't need Genesis. you have science. If you want to control the world, you don't need prayer, you have technology. If you want to prosper, you don't necessarily seek God's blessing, you have the global economy. You want to control power, you no longer need prophets, you have liberal democracy and elections. If you're ill, you don't need a priest, you can go to a doctor. If you feel guilty, you don't have to confess. You can go to a psychotherapist instead. If you're depressed, you don't need faith. You can take a pill. If you need salvation, you can go to today's cathedrals, the shopping centers of Britain, or as one American writer calls them, weapons of mass consumption. Religion seems superfluous, redundant, de trop. Why then does it survive? My answer is simple. Religion survives because it answers 3 questions that every reflective person must ask. Who am I? Why am I here? How then shall I live? Let's look at that again. Who am I? Why am I here? How then shall I live? Rabbi Abraham Isaac HaKohen Kook, Avraham Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, also known as Rav Kook. Rav Kook was one of the great religious personalities of the early 20th century. He was the first chief rabbi of the modern Israel. It was before the state.
During the British Mandate.
During the British Mandate, of course, even before.
He was there even before?
He was there before the world. He spent World War I in Switzerland and England. But I don't know if he was the chief rabbi yet. I think he only became the chief rabbi shortly afterwards. Rav Kook was a great thinker, a mystic, a Kabbalist, a Talmudist, a scientist, a linguist, a poet. He wrote a beautiful paragraph. This is what he says. Before I was created, it applies to him, but it applies to all of us. Before I was created, during all the limitless time that came before me, there was nothing in the world that required me. Had I been needed for any purpose or task, I would have existed earlier. The fact that I wasn't created until that specific moment is proof that there was no need for me until then. My existence was not necessary until it was. And when the time came, I was brought into the world to fulfill a role, to contribute something essential to the perfection of existence. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we were all born at exactly the right moment because the world needed us. And God sent our souls down into this world, each one of us, to fulfill a unique mission. And ultimately, true meaning in life will come from discovering objectively what each one of us is here for. Figure out why we're here, and we'll know what our mission is. Figure out our mission, and we'll know why we're here. And then life becomes meaningful. We don't have to invent meaning. We have to discover our purpose. If we invent meaning, we will never be satisfied. If we discover our purpose, we won't have the question. Any questions or comments?
This implies there's one thing, but that I'm wondering, I'm thinking purpose could change, right, depending on what stage you are.
Absolutely.
If you're raising children and building a career, that's part of it, or is there this stuff that's just about purpose?
So that's a very, very good question. And the answer to that question is, I think you're quite right. Our purpose in life goes through different phases. We have different roles at different times of our lives, for sure, and different missions and different things. And what we have to recognize, therefore, is that the purpose that I have in life ultimately is by divine providence, my life is the way it is. And that means I've got a mission to deal with the way things are. Where I live is purposeful and meaningful. And the people I interact with, and the job that I have or I don't have, and the stage that I'm in, this is my portion of the world. This is my moment. I am like Esther. I need to rise to the occasion and do good in the world and see where can I contribute and what can I do and what can I bring into the world at this particular time of my life. I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you a story. I heard the story from Rabbi Darren in Stanford. Today was the yahrzeit of Rabbi Darren's son, Mendel Darren, of blessed memory. Some of you remember Mendy. Mendy was there. Mendy died about 12 or 13 years ago. And he was, I think, in his late 30s, or I think he was in his late 30s when he passed away. And he was a wonderful man. And he had a very difficult life because he had health challenges his whole life. And when he was a little boy, he was in a hospital. And Rabbi Darren told the story that when Mendy was in hospital as a little boy, Rabbi Darren called the office of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to ask the Rebbe for a blessing because his child was in hospital. And the secretary said, hold a minute. And he came back a few minutes later and he said, the Rebbe has a message for you. The message is that for sure God doesn't want you wasting your time in a hospital. So there must be a purpose for why you're there. So use your opportunity while you're in the hospital building to inspire other Jews. So Rabbi Darren says it totally changed it. Now they were in the hospital with a mission to find other Jews that inspire them. And he spent the next few days that Mendy was in hospital, walking around the hospital ward, finding other families, inspiring them, comforting them, helping them. He had a mission there. In other words, understanding that your life has a purpose. You don't just find yourself in a hospital. God put him in a hospital to meet people and inspire those people and bring more joy and light and warmth into their lives. So I think what the Rebbe was obviously giving them was a gift in terms of reframing the whole experience and giving meaning and purpose to the entire thing. But that's obviously not just true for them, it's true for all of us. That wherever we are in this world, it's something, I'll tell you something interesting. I often visit in fact, every year on Hanukkah, I visit at Silver Hill Hospital here at New Canaan. And we do a Hanukkah party at Silver Hill, usually on the first or second night of Hanukkah. And for the patients that are in the hospital, it's very difficult for many of them to be there over Hanukkah, especially the ones that come from more traditional families, because they're not with their family for Hanukkah. And obviously they're doing very important work in their own lives, and in many ways they're doing it for their families, depending on what's going on. and there's a meaning to what they're doing, but it's not easy to be away from their families during a holiday. And something I always speak about there is the power that we have on Hanukkah. Hanukkah is about candles, it's about light. And the power that we have to bring light into the lives of other people. And people find it very meaningful always when I say that while you're here, one of the things to be thinking about is how to help the other people around you as well. Not only focusing internally on yourself, but also seeing what light can you bring to other people over here as well. And that's just one example. And the same is true, and you look in the Torah about Joseph, that when he was in jail, he saw two people that looked very depressed, and he interpreted their dreams. And that's where his salvation came from. Because bringing light to other people warms us like nothing else. Right? Bringing light to other people is the greatest gift that we can have. So being observant, what do they say? It's important to be an observant Jew. An observant Jew is a Jew who is observing what's going on in the world and seeing an opportunity to influence someone else and bring light into the world and do goodness and do another deed. There are always mitzvahs waiting to be done. There are always people that can be helped. There's always someone else who could use a smile. Depending on what stage of life we're in, it's different things. There's different ways we give. But the idea is not only trying to figure out what's my meaning and my purpose and my this. That's not the way to do it. The question is, what can I contribute? Which brings me, what objectively can I do over here that's productive for the world, for God, for the community, in every situation that I'm in? Which brings me, on page 51 at the bottom of the page, to one of my favorite stories. This is a story I've told many times over the years, but here it's written out. It's not the whole story, but much of the story. So the background to the story is this story took place about 200 years ago, maybe more, 220 years ago, with a chassid, a very pious man, a very holy man, a very spiritual man, a very gifted man, a very wealthy man, a very lovely man. He had everything in the world and everything was wonderful, and he was really a very special human being. And then one day, he became impoverished. The wheel of fortune turned, and all his investments went south, and who knows exactly what happened, but he became a very poor man. And he was distraught. So he came to his Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the founder of Chabad, the author of the Tanya, and he came to his Rebbe to ask for a blessing and for advice. Page 52 in our books. He traveled to the Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and poured out his heart with many tears and deep anguish. If God has seen fit to afflict me with poverty, I accept the judgment, he said. But how can I, God forbid, remain in debt and fail to repay? How can I not fulfill the promises I made to my family and relatives and my daughter's weddings? I made those promises back when I was wealthy, according to our holy Torah. I had every right to make those commitments. If I now fail to keep them, it will be a desecration of God's name. He cried bitterly over the great punishment that he was being made to endure. With great emotion, he begged the Rebbe to arouse abundant mercy on his behalf from the source of true compassion and kindness, that he might repay his debts and fulfill his promises. After that, he said, I'll accept whatever poverty heaven has decreed upon me. He ended his words, Rebbe, I need to pay all my debts. I need to give my relatives and family members what I promised them. I need to provide for the weddings of my 2 daughters, as I promised them. The Rebbe was leaning on his holy arms in deep spiritual absorption, listening to the man's cries and pleas. After some time, the Rebbe lifted his holy head and, still absorbed in that intense spiritual state, said, You speak of what you need, but you say nothing about why you are needed. And the man fainted. And when he finally was brought to, he couldn't control himself and he went out and he was crying, and he spent 3 days in deep study and meditation and prayer. And after 3 days, he was overjoyed and he went back home a different man, thinking not about what he needs, but about what he's needed for. What his mission was. And after that, he became wealthy again, and he was able to continue and do all the things that he was needed for in this world. And that's the story. So now what's fascinating about it is, if you read this passage, does this man seem like he wanted the wealth for himself?
No.
He seems like a nice guy. He
Yep.
just wanted to pay his debts, right?
Yeah, why do you have that?
He made promises.
Okay.
He doesn't seem like a bad guy. And when the Rebbe said to him, you ask, what do you say? You speak of what you need, but you say nothing about why you are needed.
But he said that's because he made promises.
So I was thinking about it, and I read this passage a few times to try to understand what's going on over here.
Kind of circular logic.
It's almost circular, yeah. And then I realized, after reading it, how many times does this guy say the word I?
Yeah,
Did you notice that?
that's true.
Many.
Yeah. I promised I need to repay. Yeah,
It's all about him.
yeah.
He doesn't say, Rebbe, my daughters need a wedding. He says, I promised my daughters a wedding. He doesn't say my creditors need to get paid. He says, I need to pay my creditors.
About his own ego and his own need to save face.
It was all him. For a second, the Rebbe turned him around and said, it's not about you, but it's about all those other people that need you, it's about all those other people. He helped him extract himself from the center, from being self-centered.
Right.
Because when we're self-centered, narcissistic, and it's all about me, I'll never find my objective purpose. My whole life will be about subjective thinking. So the question is about trying to determine objectively, not subjectively, but objectively, what am I here for? What really am I here for? Not what do I want to be doing with my life, but what am I needed for? What difference can I make? And what purpose does God have in mind for me? And the answer to that, ladies and gentlemen, is our purpose. And when we find our purpose, then our lives take on a whole new meaning. Because not subjective meaning, it's objective meaning. It really has a purpose. So looking at the screen for a second, if we're subjective, well, then it's just beneficial to you, maybe, but it's not even lasting. It's not even permanent. How do I get this thing off somewhere where it doesn't get in the way? There we go. But if it's objective, then this is the purpose of your position, and it's there for the whole world benefits from it as well. So let's go back to our two little objects. So let me tell you what they are.
Opener.
Whoever said that the object on the right was designed to be a tool to extract the pit from a fruit is correct. That is exactly what it's for. It's a intentional creation for removing pits from cherries. It's a cherry pitter. Did you know such a thing existed? Okay, I never thought about it. The one on the left was designed by ChatGPT. The input was, please design an absolutely useless tool.
Okay, I think we'll be getting into AI generated art.
Wow.
But I think this is really the most important image of the day. This is from the great genius, Gary Larson in The Far Side. And we have over here, Edgar finds his purpose. We all need to find our purpose. Do you know where Edgar's purpose was? Under the cushions of the couch, right? So if you want to know how to find your purpose, ladies and gentlemen, that's Edgar's, and you'll probably find yours under the couch as well. Okay, more seriously, ladies and gentlemen. The selfish approach to life is, what do I find meaningful? The Jewish approach is, what objectively is my purpose? So how do we find objective purpose? Ladies and gentlemen, how do we find objective purpose? So again, we'll turn to the Lord for the answer. This time, the Lord Jonathan Sacks. Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory wrote like this, page 55. This is from his book, an excellent book, The Great Partnership, Science, Religion, and the Search for Meaning. It says, take a game like football. Some hypothetical visitor from a land to which football has not yet penetrated wants to understand the strange ritual which excites so much passion. You explain the rules of the game, what counts as a foul, what constitutes a goal, and so on. Fine, says the visitor. I now understand the game. What I don't understand is why you get so excited about it. Here you might have to launch into some larger reflection about games as ritualized conflict and the role of play and rehearsing skills needed in actual conflict. You might even suggest that ritualized conflict reduces the need for actual conflict. The football pitch is a substitute for the battlefield. There is an internal logic of the system, the rules of football, but the meaning of the system lies elsewhere, and it can only be understood through some sense of the wider human context in which it is set. To do this, you have to step outside the system and see why it was brought into being. There is no way of understanding the meaning of football by merely knowing its rules. They tell you how to play the game, but not why people do so and why they invest in it, the passions they do. The internal workings of a system do not explain the place the system holds in human lives. The meaning of the system lies outside the system. Therefore, the meaning of the universe lies outside the universe. Only something or someone outside the universe can give meaning to the universe. So, at our course, the Kabbalah of Meaning, of course, we understand that when God created the universe, he did it with a purpose. There was a reason. And the reason is revealed to us in his communication with man, which is the Torah. And so by studying the Torah and God's wisdom for the world, over there we can find the purpose, the meaning of life, our purpose in this world, how we should live, what we should do. And that gives meaning to our lives in a whole nother way, which is why you'll notice when we studied from Ecclesiastes in the beginning of our lesson, and you can go back there, on page 41, first page 39, King Solomon said, there's nothing truly lasting under the sun. Do you notice that? The last line, under the sun. And then a few verses later on page 41, that made me laugh, hate life. Everything happening under the sun seems so pointless, just chasing the wind. Everything inside the system. Inside the system, there's no meaning. The only way to access true meaning, says King Solomon, is by going outside the system, connecting to God, living a more spiritual life, living a purposeful life where you connect with the infinite one who's beyond the system or the universe. Connect with the infinite one who's outside the system of life. You'll discover your purpose for why you are here. And then everything becomes meaningful. And that's how he concludes the book of Ecclesiastes on page 80 in our book's text 11. King Solomon says, the end of the matter, page 60, the end of the matter, after everything is considered, revere God and keep his commandments, because that's what it means to be human. Ultimately, the true meaning comes from getting above the sun, connecting above the sun, connecting with the eternal. When you connect with the eternal one, then life in this world starts to have eternal meaning. This can also be seen in the wonderful parable that we have from Rabbi Akiva. Page 59 in our books. The Talmud tells the story that once the wicked Roman government issued a decree forbidding Jews from studying Torah. Pappus ben Yehuda came upon Rabbi Akiva, who was publicly gathering groups and teaching Torah. He said to him, Akiva, aren't you afraid of the authorities? Rabbi Akiva replied, let me tell you a parable. A fox was walking along a river and saw fish darting back and forth. He said to them, why are you fleeing? They answered, from the nets that people have cast for us. Said the fox, why don't you come up onto dry land and live with me, just as your ancestors lived with mine? The fish said to him, are you the one they call the cleverest of animals? You're not clever. You're foolish. If we're in danger even here in the place that gives us life, how much more so if we leave it for a place where we can't survive? The same is true for us, Rabbi Akiva concluded. If we're at risk even while studying Torah, the source of our life, as it says, for it is your life and the length of your days, how much worse would it be if we abandoned it? And so, ladies and gentlemen, the idea over here, of course, is that if we want to have real meaning in life, we have to discover our purpose. And if we want to discover our purpose, we can't look inside the system. We have to connect with the infinite one who's beyond the system. And with his teachings as expressed in the Torah, and also by recognizing that everything that happens in this world is by divine providence. We are exactly where we are supposed to be. It's not an accident, it's not a mistake. We are exactly where we need to be. And like Queen Esther, we have to ask, what are we needed for? And with the answer to that question, we can truly make a difference and reveal our purpose in this world. Any questions or comments, ladies and gentlemen?
That whole scene that you exactly where you should be, it's almost like the fate is predetermined, but we're supposed to choose the free will. That would make it different. So I have a little.
So you ask a very good question. If everything is determined by God and we are exactly where we're supposed to be, where does free choice enter? The answer is the mystics teach that the free choice that we have is our moral choices. Moral choices. How we live. How we live.
Okay.
How we live. I'll tell you a fascinating thing. I know in my life, Michal and I have been married for nearly 22 years now, okay? For some of you, that sounds like nothing. For me, that sounds like a lot. Baruch Hashem, thank God. And one of the things I've learned in life is that Michal usually knows what I'm going to do 3 weeks before I do. Okay?
Again, the women.
Okay, at least. Sometimes 6 months or longer. Okay? So I'm sitting over there trying to. The truth is, I'm wasting everybody's time. Because we know what's going to happen. There's certain things that we know what's going to happen, but we think and we sit there and we agonize and we wonder and we stress and we worry and we this and we that, and it's a bunch of nonsense. It's really a bunch of nonsense. Because it's already in motion, it's already happening, it's already this. So what is the free choice that we really have? The free choice that we really have is the moral choices that we make. How are we going to spend the next 3 weeks? How are we going to do it? What are we going to do with our time? What kind of difference will we make to other people? Right? How are we going to spend the time? That's up to us. And there's many, many examples of this in the Torah that explain this idea. Okay. So the Jewish approach, ladies and gentlemen, ask, what is my purpose? Connecticut's most famous writer, right? Mark Twain once said that the 2 most important days in your life are the days you were born and the day you found out why. I'm going to watch a little video. Can you hear this at home? Is the sound, let me do something.
It works. It all works.
The sound was coming as well, right?
Yeah.
How about now still?
Yes.
Hey, cow. What's the meaning of life?
Here, have some.
Thanks. I'll pass. Parrot, what's the meaning of life?
What? What's the meaning of life? Oh.
Yeah, that's not helping. Lion, what's the meaning of life?
Life has meaning?
Noted. Moving along. What's that circle?
Take a guess.
A sun? That's it?
Wrong.
Maybe a person?
Nope.
I know, a balloon.
Nice, but no.
If it's not a sun, a head, or a balloon, maybe it doesn't mean anything.
It does, but it's in my mind. I made it for a purpose. You just have to ask me.
Okay, I give up. What is it?
A cake.
A cake?
You kept guessing the circle's meaning. Your answers were clever, but not what I intended. Life is the same. To know the truth, you must ask the one who made it.
Brilliant, right? Okay.
Whoa.
Ladies and gentlemen, our quest for the ultimate meaning leads us to the Torah, where we get the Torah has all the things that we need in it and will give us meaning to everything. Ultimately, Solomon said, his conclusion was, what is meaningful? To reveal God and keep his commandments, because that's what it means.
Lesson 2. To make or not to make.
I'm going to come back to this in a second, ladies and gentlemen. I want to show you one more video. This is a video that was shown last weekend at the annual Chabad conference of all the emissaries from around the world. And it's a fascinating video, worth watching. Am I in the right place here? Where is it? I'm on the wrong screen over here, but I'll bring it up. Can you see my screen? Well, firstly, let me show you this. This is very important. This is at lessons.myjli.com/TKOM, which stands for the Kabbalah of Meaning. And after each lesson, you can come here, and this is the post-lesson site for this course. And they have the PowerPoints and the key points and the videos of the class, and a whole bunch of other lectures and videos on the topics. So this is lesson 1, and then there's a lesson 2 page, and you can see all these things online. So again, that can be found you can actually just go to myjli.com/TKOM to find this. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop share for 1 second, and I'm going to close this up for 1 second as I bring up that other video, which is this video here. Share. Let's open up over here for a second. Share. Sound is on. Share. And here's the video. Make this small. And we're going to end the class with this video.
When I think of the Marine Corps, right, I think of legacy and I think of pride of belonging. The Marine Corps is.
By the way, I'm showing this video because when I watched this video at the conference on Sunday, it made me think about this lesson and the difference between meaning and purpose. And this young man, I think, explores the concepts of meaning and purpose and meaning very well in this video.
Very storied tradition. There's this pride of belonging that every Marine has gone through something to get to this place where they get to wear that uniform. It's a privilege, it's an honor that one gets to carry with them, and it's something that I'm proud of every single day of my life. My name is Staff Sergeant Benjamin Craig. I'm a U.S. Marine, active duty. I've been in for about 10 years. I grew up in a small town outside Boston. Grew up in a Jewish family, very disconnected from Yiddishkeit. I didn't know what Shabbat was. I didn't know what tefillin was. When the time came and my mom asked me about a bar mitzvah, I wasn't really that interested because I didn't really know what it was or what the meaning behind it was. As a kid, as I became a teenager and I was, going through high school in America, I knew that I was going down the wrong path. I knew I wasn't applying myself in a meaningful way. So I kind of came to a point where I was looking at my future and knowing that I was coming to a fork in the road and I needed to make some kind of a change. I need something and really get me in the right direction, and the Marine Corps stood out above the rest. Its whole image is that you try to become a Marine. The Marine Corps doesn't try to get you. You need to prove that you can be here. You need to prove that you can make it. And that was kind of what I was looking for.
You are now aboard the United States Marine Corps recruit people.
You'll never be prepared for boot camp. The second you get off that bus, it's just chaos. There's yelling, everyone is completely shocked, no matter how prepared you are, and you're just trying to do the next step day by day. It seems impossible, especially for any 18-year-old kid coming from a completely different life. Probably about the halfway mark through, I was like, this is great. I was always looking for purpose, for meaning, for a reason to be doing something. And once you find a purpose, once you find a thing that drives you forward, you kind of become unstoppable a little bit. Because you know, hey, I'm doing the right things here. I know that this is bringing purpose and meaning, not just to me, but to the world. That's what the Marine Corps gave me, at least until I had some moments later in life. The Marine Corps is in Okinawa because we actually won it in a battle in World War II. It was one of the bloodiest battles we fought. We got to Japan in August of 2020. It's a new tropical climate, which is very different. I'm with a whole new group of people. I'm living in a very, very different place. So I was kind of looking around and thinking to myself, you know, what can kind of bring me a little bit of connection here? I went to my unit's chaplain. I know I'm in Okinawa. Is there anything Jewish on this island? And at first he laughed and looked at me and goes, oh, you're serious? I said, yes.
Hello, my name is Captain Levi Picard. I'm the True North Chaplain at the 18th Maintenance Group at Kabini Air Base, Okinawa, Japan. Today I'm going to talk to you about some of the basic Jewish worship practices.
The only rabbis I'd ever met before this were very Reform rabbis. So you can imagine my shock a little bit when I walk in. And there's an officer standing in front of me. He's a chaplain. He's wearing his Air Force uniform, but he's got this big, mangly beard. And I was kind of like, these two things have never got, like, I don't understand this, right? Like in the military, you don't usually have a beard. It's not usually common. And you definitely don't have one like this. There's these things hanging out of his uniform, and like, I don't get it. And so he kind of took me under his arm and he said, okay, like, this is a good start. And I was like, start of what? He kept talking to me and he was like, come next Friday, come for Shabbos. And I said, what's that? And that was my first ever Shabbat service. I understood almost none of it. I didn't understand why people were standing and then sitting back down and then standing back up and then sitting back down. A lot of things happening. I was just completely lost. And so I said to him, I was like, hey, listen, like, can I walk you guys back to your car? And he was like, we didn't drive here. Like, we walked here, and proceeded to explain what Shabbat actually means. Over the next probably year and a half, I don't think I missed a single Shabbat service. And that walk became kind of the highlight of my week. I remember when we put on tefillin for the first time. I had no idea what it was, and I didn't understand what was going on. Why am I doing 3 wraps right here and 7 here? And he told me, like, don't think about the, having the right amount of straps. Don't think about this or that. Sit down, take a moment for yourself. Just go internal for a minute, connect with Hashem, talk to him, and just kind of really enjoy this moment, because you're never going to put the tefillin on again for the first time. Something changed after that, and I really started connecting more deeply, identifying with it more deeply. I don't think I could have gone on the next chapter if not have been for that period, been ready for the next part of my life if I hadn't gone through that first. One of the things that makes the Marine Corps unique is that it's not just about them and what they've done, it's passing that on to the next guy. And that's what's kept the Marine Corps going so long for so well. That's 10 times bigger in Judaism. Hundreds of generations of people who have made it a point and a privilege to teach the ways of their own people. Now I get to go every Sunday and I get to meet with the Jewish candidates at Officer Candidate School, and I get to teach them, impart on them the Parsha. I get to teach them a little bit of Yiddishkeit. I get to show them how to wrap a tefillin. Make a covenant, right? Just as we're doing a covenant with God, we're binding ourselves to God and to the Torah. The tefillin is a way of doing that. And so if you see these 4 little compartments, each one of those is a handwritten scribe from the Torah that is actually written by an actual scribe by hand with ink, right? the central prayer of Judaism. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I get to bring them some challah, some grape juice. I get to make a blessing with them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, chamot elech min haaretz. Whether it was in Japan or in Korea or in the Philippines, getting kosher meal, someplace to go on a Friday night, meant the world to me. Because they never know who's going to come through that door. They never know how lost or how connected someone is trying to get. That is why the Rebbe did his mission. And it's why he sent out both his soldiers and his shluchim, because they were one and the same. There's 1,000 reasons someone can give to say, why would you move to this tiny rock on the far side of the world where there's frankly nothing? Why would you pack up your whole family and move? I'm sure there are moments where it was like, what are we doing here? I feel lucky because I can be the reason to say, this is why you were here. Because of Rabbi Pekar coming there is what allowed me to get bar mitzvahed. It's the reason I went to Israel for the first time. It's the reason I came back here and started teaching my own classes to other Jewish candidates. But if it wasn't for Rabbi Pekar, if it wasn't for the shluchim actually taking the chance and getting out there, I never would be here.
Und werden sie anzünden den Feier an die Lichtigkeit von dem Ner Hashem, und das ist die Arbeit von Israel bechol Dei.
I found a spiritual core for myself that the day where I hang up this uniform, the day that I stop wearing it, I still have something else. I'm a better Marine because I'm a good Jew, and I'm a better Jew because of my core values as a Marine. The two things go together with themselves. They're not separate entities in myself. One day, right now I'm in the American military, but one day I'll be working for the Army of Hashem.
At the conference, that's what happened. They came out second.
Please, welcome to the stage, Rabbi Levi Pekar, Chaplain, Captain, United States Air Force.
I'm not going to talk about it. But what I wanted to say about this is I was fascinated about this young man who was clearly living a meaningful life, but he wanted something more. And obviously, what happened over there is that as he said, he connected now with something eternal, with his Jewish heritage, with God, with spirituality, which is something he didn't have. And that obviously gave a whole nother level of meaning to his life, including a whole nother level of purpose in his life and mission, and connecting with the eternal, with the spiritual. Obviously brings the meaning in our life to a whole nother level. And that's what lesson 2 in this class is about. And next week, ladies and gentlemen, in lesson 3, we talk about meaning in the mundane. That's the topic. I do want to point out that there are a few additional readings at the end of the class. There's a summary of the key points, and then page 62 and 63, there's some extra texts and stories that are worth reading, and I encourage you to do that at home, as well as to check out that other website that I mentioned, myjla.com/The Kabbalah of Meaning, TKOM. Ladies and gentlemen, myjli.com/TKOM. Have a wonderful week, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you next week for lesson 3 of our class as we continue our journey towards a more meaningful life. Thank you very much. Any last questions or comments before we call it a night?
This is an excellent course, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you
Really,
very much.
Everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good to see you all. See you soon. If anybody wants a book and didn't get one yet, please reach out. We have more books. We'll find a way to get it to you. So be in touch. All the best. Be well. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.